Subscribe Nightmare Network and press the bell icon to listen horror and scary stories regularly.
This happened when I was 20 and had just moved to Tokyo for college. I was living in a dorm that was unfortunately about an hour away from my school and the center of Tokyo. Japan is one of the safest countries in the world. People leave their bikes unlocked for hours on the street in the middle of the city and nobody will lay a hand on them. The only real crime problem they have is pervs on the subway with wandering hands. But since I'm very obviously American and don't put up with crap, I guess no guys have ever been brave enough to try anything on me. That was until one night when I ended up going out to dinner with a friend and had to take a late train back to my dorm. If you've ever been on the Japanese subway, you'll know how crowded the express trains can get at night and early in the morning. They literally have men standing outside of the train who push passengers in like a bunch of sardines. I was pretty tired and not in the mood to stand for an hour between a bunch of sweaty, drunk businessmen, so I opted to take the local train back to my dorm, even though it would take about 15 minutes longer than the express. I was sitting in the train and nothing was out of the ordinary. As the train went along, more and more people started getting off the train until it was only me and one other man in our car. He was just your typical middle-aged Japanese businessman, a little on the greasy side. After a few stops, no one else got on, and the man didn't get off. I could feel him watching me from the other side of the car. I wasn't too worried. I get a lot of stares, being a young American girl in the middle of Tokyo. But then the guy started inching his way across the car closer to where I was sitting. I thought, no big deal. Maybe he's trying to get close to a map on the wall. I could still feel his eyes on me, so just to be safe, I moved to the other end of the car. It's more comfortable in the reserved seats anyway. Then it got weird. The guy got up and moved to the exact same seat I had just been sitting in. I was kind of grossed out. What was he trying to do? Feel my warmth from having just been sitting there. I was starting to get uneasy. Luckily, the train stopped at its next stop and the guy got off the train. I was relieved until he came back on the train through the door right in front of me and sat directly next to me, looking straight at me and open-mouthed, breathing on me. I didn't make eye contact and just kind of sat frozen for a second until I realized what was going on. I looked at him like, oh, don't even try anything on me, and stood to get up. Luckily, someone else got on the train at the exact same time, and he literally bolted off the train before the door shut and we left. I don't know what he was planning on doing that he'd risk missing a stopover, but thank God someone else got on the train when they did. Needless to say, I put up with standing for an hour and take the express train from now on. I live in Vancouver, British Columbia. Our subway system is called the Sky Train, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a train on a track above street level. This happened to me last summer. I was coming from downtown Vancouver and headed back to Burnaby via the Sky Train. A man got on and sat next to me. Not a big deal, except that the train was nearly empty, and there were plenty of other open seats he could have taken. I brushed it off and continued listening to my music. A stop or two later, I noticed he was slightly nudging my left breast with his elbow. I'm rather busty, so I brushed it off as him not even realizing what he was doing. However, shortly after that, he had his hand resting very close to my thigh, and over the course of 15 minutes it developed into him full-on squeezing my thigh and rubbing dangerously close to my privates. I turned my head out the window and silently cried while he did this. I'm socially awkward and don't know how to stick up for myself in these situations. I suddenly summoned the courage to yell at him, so I took my headphones out of my ears and was about to scream when he suddenly said, "I don't feel good," which completely deflated my courage to stand up for myself. My stop was coming very soon, so I just told myself to endure 3 more minutes of this, and I'd be free. He then tried to strike up a conversation with me. I pretended not to speak English and spoke in Dutch instead, thinking it would deter him. My stop came, and I quickly got off the train and ran down the stairs. It wasn't until I heard the man's voice screaming, "Wait! Wait!" that I realized he was following me. I continued to run and ran outside the station to catch my breath and hide. I thought I'd lost him, so I ran back inside to use a payphone. My cell phone was dead. To call a friend to come pick me up. I circled the area while waiting to make sure he hadn't followed me. I thought I was safe to rest and wait for my friend to come get me when the man walked up to me again and said, "Are you lost?" I replied, "No, I am not." He said, I saw you circling the station and I wanted to make sure you weren't lost." I continued to pretend not to speak English, hoping my broken answers would make him leave me alone. I was wrong again, of course, and he continued to persist with questions about my personal life, which made me uncomfortable. My friend finally arrived, and I quickly got in his car and told him to drive. He asked me if I knew that guy, and I told him what happened. He wanted to turn the car around and beat the crap out of him, but I told him I just wanted to forget about it. In hindsight, I should have phoned the police or stuck up for myself, but I wasn't thinking straight because of how terrified I was. Since mid-July 2021, China's Henan province experienced a prolonged period of heavy rainfall. In just 1 hour, weather stations in the provincial capital of Zhengzhou observed a maximum rainfall of 20 centimeters. While this may not sound significant, it caused a horrifying 302 deaths. The flooding affected 9.3 million people, with over 800,000 requiring emergency evacuation. Amid the hundreds of thousands of tragic and terrifying stories from Henan, none are quite as horrifying as those from the floods of July 20th. Zhengzhou, located in a semi-arid region far from China's coasts, typically averages 60 centimeters of annual rainfall. However, on July 20th alone, 67 centimeters of rain was dumped on the city. The water pooled in low-lying areas, flooding many streets. Zhengzhou University's chief hydrologist, Hu Kai-hong, noted that the city's drainage system was built to withstand a 100-year flood, meaning such floods should occur only once every 100 years. In contrast, the subterranean Zhengzhou metro system was designed to withstand a 200-year flood, with entrances built on raised platforms to mitigate heavy summer rains. Yet, Hu later stated that the rainfall on July 20th resembled a 1,000-year flood. Unbeknownst to the subway system's operators, water had begun collecting in a metro yard in a low-lying area of the city. Around 6 p.m., commuters traveling on the Zhengzhou subway system were aware of the heavy rain, but were assured the system was flood-proof. However, when all the trains suddenly ground to a halt, most within the network of tunnels, passengers began to suspect otherwise. Initially, some believed it was a temporary fault, but as time passed, they grew concerned. By 6:10 p.m., just over 500 passengers were trapped underground, noticing water pooling on the tracks outside their windows. They suspected a leak, but couldn't anticipate the dire situation about to unfold. Over the next hour, the water levels outside the subway trains rose steadily. Cell phone videos from the incident captured the increasing anxiety and eventual terror as the water reached the windows of the train's sliding doors. Water began to leak into the train carriages, forcing terrified passengers to stand on seats to avoid the rising waters. When it became too difficult to breathe, they fought for their lives, breaking out of the trains and swimming to safety. Many described the sheer terror they felt as they swam harder and faster than ever before, dreading the moment the water would slip over their heads, separating them from a painful death by drowning. Their relief upon emerging at various metro stations, wading through waist and chest-high waters, was immense. Elsewhere in Zhengzhou, nearly 100 children had to be rescued from a flooded nursery school, with footage showing them being floated out in plastic tubs by rescue workers. The first affiliated hospital of Zhengzhou briefly lost power, complicating efforts to treat flood casualties. But authorities quickly restored power within a few hours, preventing any additional deaths. The floods prompted the mobilization of an entire battalion of the Chinese People's Liberation Army, PLA, after a 20-meter breach emerged in the Luoyang City Dam. PLA High Command was warned that the dam could collapse at any time, potentially causing tens of thousands of flood-related deaths. Thankfully, the dam held, but Chinese social media was flooded with horrifying statuses from terrified victims, such as, "We don't know how to swim. The whole village is about to be washed away." The devastation of entire families was documented in less than 140 characters. Out of the 500 passengers trapped underground that evening, it seems a miracle that only 12 people lost their lives. However, these are 12 lives that should not have been lost. While the cause of such dramatic rainfall can be debated, the integrity of the city's public transport system must be questioned, given its spectacular and fatal failure. We can only hope that the lessons from the Zhengzhou subway floods are learned, ensuring that when the next apocalyptic rainstorm arrives, we are much better prepared.